Wake up, let's talk sports. And man, is there ever some sports to talk about this Saturday morning. I'm Ashton here with Tony, who's in the beautiful sunny Galveston, Texas. I guess it's not sunny there yet. It's not sunny here yet.
It's actually
we were doing our shows and it was light. Yeah, it was light when we started doing our shows with daylight saving times. This kind of screwed that up.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm Ashton here with Tony, getting you ready for your Saturday. So grab your coffee, your energy drink, and let's talk sports. It's March Madness, and I don't know of any year that the madness has really stuck than this year. What is your bracket looking like? Have you even ripped it up yet?
My bracket's toast. I still have my Final Four teams, but I'm completely. There's all these upsets, man. They've wrecked my bracket. I didn't expect these upsets.
And we know there's always going to be some upset. I think statistically, there's always a 12 that beats a 5. This is the third straight year that a 15 has beaten a 2. Just the second time ever, a 16 has beaten a 1, which we'll start off with here in a minute. I don't know what technically considers a bracket busted, but I know in my group of people that we do our brackets and throw some money in, that I still have all my Elite 8 teams. I didn't even realize that. I knew I had my Final Four teams, but I just checked this morning. All my Elite 8 teams are still good, which it's only the first round. That's ridiculous that I have to be excited about that. And I'm kind of middle of the road with points, but a lot of people above me had Arizona winning it all, or in the Final Four, they had Purdue in the finals. So there's a lot of ground to make up for me there if my Elite 8 Final Four teams do well. But like I said, let's just jump right in it. The number 1 seed losing to a 16, it's just the second time that's ever happened. Fairleigh Dickinson. I have to admit, I think I've heard of them once before. If you had asked me just nonchalantly about Fairleigh Dickinson, I may not be able to tell you it was a school. But Fairleigh Dickinson University beats Purdue. They had 4 wins last season. 4 wins, and they're the Knights. The Knights come into this tournament.
They had to play in a play-in game. They had to play in a play-in game to even get into the bracket,
and it's
to even face Purdue. So, who would have thought?
It's hard. There's not much you can say about it because I don't know that much about the team. I was struggling to do some research because that was something we did. I didn't even really pay that much attention to the game till halftime when it was. I think they were winning at halftime, or it was really close. I remember the coach in an interview said now he has to go do a bunch of research on the Memphis. Who are they playing? Memphis, and who did Memphis just lose to? Florida Atlantic, because he didn't expect them to win either. Up until right before, I know you shared a video. He said, the more I watch Purdue, the more I think we can beat them. But he said, admittedly, I haven't done any research on any of the other teams ahead. I was just focused on this game, which was great. He used to watch it right after.
I think that's the key to March Madness and getting through this bracket is you just have to take this thing one game at a time. You can't think too far ahead because it's almost impossible to predict what the outcome's going to be at all the other brackets.
Yeah, and in the professional ranks, I know they pay people to do that. When you have your third string quarterback, or maybe your prep team quarterback, whatever you want to call it, they always study who the next opponent is a week ahead so they can kind of mimic them for the defense to go against. But college, you can only, the only people getting paid are the coaches and some of the good players with the NIL deals. You have to focus on that. Now, I'm sure he had some assistant coach or grad student or something kind of looking ahead and watching just to say, hey, here's what you need to focus on or something like that. But they had last night to watch the Memphis FAU game, which was a great game. We'll talk about, and have today to prepare for them. Usually when we talk March Madness, the madness factor of it is Cinderella teams, is upsets, which we had plenty of those worries there. But just the way some of these games are ending, buzzer beaters. We'll talk this game later. TCU, Arizona State. There were a lot of missed free throws and turnovers, and not like bad, crappy play. It was just really good defensive play. Offensive fouls. There's just kind of weird ways some of these games have ended. And we'll talk about that Virginia Furman game and how that one ended. Furman down by 2 points. Virginia has the ball, less than 10 seconds to go.
Close it out. Yeah.
And Furman's coach to just box him out, trap him before you try to steal or before you try to foul. Just see what you can do. And for some reason, I know I'm butchering his first name, Kai Clark. I apologize if I don't say the name, but Kai Clark from Virginia, with a timeout, decides he's trapped in the backcourt in the corner, and he just throws it past half court. Which, given 2-3 seconds left, maybe that's not a bad play. Just throw the ball up, let the clock run out.
Yeah.
But instead of calling a timeout, he throws it, heaves it up court. A terrible pass, stolen by Furman, and then Reese Beekman hits the game-winning three with a couple of seconds left, and then Virginia has to attempt a half-court shot, and it wasn't far from going in there. But that was really the first upset of the tournament early. I think that was the second or third game of the tournament.
Yeah, and to be so clutch, that's what really set that one off, that it was a clutch win.
And Virginia, no stranger to being upset in the tournament. They, of course, were the team who lost to the very first number one seed to lose to a 16 seed team back. I think it was 2008. Oddly enough, winning the championship the very next year. I thought this was a good game. This is the one that I thought was going to be an upset. Not that I predicted it to be an upset. I'm just saying later in the game, Kennesaw State and Xavier. Kennesaw State had that game, and they kind of just, let's say they threw it away. They didn't play bad, but I think Xavier's, they're obviously the more talented team. They were a 3 seed against 14 seed Kennesaw State. I think they finally just got it together and closed that game out. That was a close game, and that was going on at the same time or around the same time as the Gonzaga game, Gonzaga Grand Canyon University, along with the Purdue game. And I was like, well, the Kennesaw State, I think that one's going to be the upset. The other ones, I think Gonzaga figure it out. I think Purdue will figure it out. This is the one Xavier was able to figure it out.
And,
and talking about another playing team, the Pitt Panthers, Pittsburgh, they beat Iowa State. And that really wasn't that close of a game. In fact, they had a 20-2 lead over Iowa State. Iowa State had, I think they didn't have a field goal in the first 10 minutes of the game. I'm trying to remember. I think those 2 points were free throws. So they had 2 points in the first 10 minutes of the game. It was 20-2. And that game was never close. Pitt, of course, a play-in team, come in, upset Iowa State, and they're on to the next round. And I think one game that a lot of people had as one of their upsets was Iona over UConn, just because of Rick Pitino. UConn hadn't been what they were for a while. Rick Pitino, of course, the coach of Iona. And it did look like it was going to be an upset because it was a back and forth game, but Iona seemed to be up most of the game up until the end. So UConn's able to hold off Iona, and Dan Hurley, the coach of UConn since 2018, finally gets his first tournament win. Big monkey off his back, of course. UConn, a great college basketball school for both men and women's. And I just had to put a side note there. I'm glad UConn's back in the Big East. I know when back when it was mostly football, but they were conference realignment. I know TCU was temporarily going to go to the Big East or there for a little bit before they went to the Big 12. And UConn had jumped ship from the Big East because they thought it was just going to get decimated, which in football it did. And they moved to the AAC. I think it was Conference USA at the time.
Oh.
The AAC. They jumped, like they were in with SMU. I think it was when mostly football. Yeah, the American Athletic Conference. It was kind of the Conference USA, which I realize there's still a Conference USA, but all the Conference USA teams merged with the Big East teams for the ones that had football teams, and kind of what started the AAC, and then the Conference USA just moved up some other teams. Because I remember UConn was going to Dallas every year to play SMU. I wish Syracuse would move back to the Big East. I just think that's weird, them being in the ACC. But I didn't even know it till this year. Someone was talking like, I don't think they're in the Big East anymore, but UConn had moved back to the Big East.
Yeah.
Kentucky wins over Providence. The score doesn't look all that ridiculous. 61-53. Kentucky's not back to their dominance as they once were. I think they're on their way back, but they're not back there yet. But I thought Providence could have pulled off that upset. It was a very close game up until the end when Kentucky kind of pulled away. But still, it was just an 8-point game. 8 points is nothing. Yeah. That's a couple of possessions. I mean, not literally a couple of possessions, but you see the way things turn around. And I mean, we'll talk about it later. TCU was down 8 points with about 4 minutes to go, and they came back and won. And in fact, it didn't seem like a big comeback because with about 2 minutes to go, it was almost tied. So they had jumped back into that game very quickly. And I do have to admit, I had no clue that Grand Canyon University was a real school. I mean, not a real school, but I thought they were an online school. I've heard of them. I've heard their commercials. Yeah, they do have an online school, of course. I didn't mean that. I'm an online school, so online college. So I admit no disrespect to those at all. Not calling it a real college. I just meant with an athletic program, and they took on Gonzaga, and I watched them at Grand Canyon University. I didn't know they had a basketball team. Yeah, and man, do they have a basketball team? They took Gonzaga to its limit. And tell me this: how long has Drew Timme been in college basketball? It seems like he's played for Gonzaga since 2014. Yeah, he's got to be done, right? This was his senior year, or I don't know, maybe fifth year senior. It just seems like he's played forever. Yeah, and he's one of those guys, either love him or you can't stand him. And unfortunately, I say unfortunately because I would like to love him. I would like to be on the big Gonzaga bandwagon, but I just find them very annoying, and I find Drew Timme, no offense if any of his family or friends hear this, I just find him highly annoying. But I'm just not on the bandwagon. I'd like to do it'd be like the Gardner Minshew type train, Is he an NBA prospect? Is he going to play in the NBA? Surely he's famous enough that somebody's going to give him a shot. Yeah, I mean, he could be a G League. I don't know if he's I haven't done my NBA draft rep.
I don't know if he's a league guy or not. I think he could be a prospect a team would pick up, though, in the G League, see how he develops at that level.
I mean, he's been the best player on Gonzaga for the last few years, and Gonzaga has competed. So I would think by default, he'd kind of be up there to at least be in the mix in the NBA draft. But GCU took Gonzaga up until maybe halfway through the second half. They had them up on the ropes, and then Gonzaga pulled away. I didn't write down the final score. Last time I looked, they were up by 15 or 20 points. So Gonzaga takes care of GCU to avoid that upset. That was a 14-3 matchup, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. And like I said earlier about everybody likes a Cinderella team, but when your second round is, let me make sure I get this right. When your second round is Fairleigh Dickinson, and Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic seed, it's not like that was a huge upset, but you want these Cinderella teams to play Kentucky, Duke. I was going to say Ohio State, but they weren't even in the tournament. But big schools like that, now you get that matchup. You're kind of like, it's good to have a bunch of upsets, but then you start getting some of these matchups that we're not necessarily wanting to see.
Florida Atlantic matchup next round, that's
and just like this next one, Princeton upsets Arizona, and I know Princeton a few years ago was kind of known as the Giant Slayer because they had a couple of upsets. They're playing Missouri. So is it today? Yeah, they're playing Missouri today. That's an okay matchup, I guess. I don't look at Missouri as anywhere near a powerhouse school, but they're at least a Power 5 conference school. So if Princeton's able to win, obviously that's a good Cinderella story. And don't get me wrong, nothing against Florida Atlantic. They have a good basketball team this year. So clearly a Fairleigh Dickinson win would be a big up to get. Which Florida Atlantic's not traditionally looked at as one of the better basketball schools.
Yeah.
And one of the games that I had turned off at halftime.
FDU's still going to have a tough road ahead of them. I mean, if they were to get past Florida Atlantic, what they're looking at, possibly a Duke matchup, that's why I like that upset, because I had Purdue losing to do the Sweet 16 anyway. Yeah.
And I know a lot of people in my grouping had Purdue in a 4-1 had them in the championship. So it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily advantageous to me now, but those points that they're not getting later on will matter if my teams keep winning. So I thought that was a great one. But yeah, of course, being a 16, they're going to be underdogs in every matchup and huge underdogs. It's not like they're just a team that normally plays pretty well and just had a bad year. No, they've, I don't know. I assume that they've won a tournament game before because I didn't hear that it was their first ever win, but clearly they are in for a long road ahead. I feel like there's a blowout coming up at some point.
Yeah, they don't have anything to lose. For FDU,
they're playing with house money now.
Yeah, they've already made history. What else do they have to prove this year? Now, you can't argue that Purdue hadn't been their best to finish the season either. I had watched a little bit of Purdue's last handful of games, and they just didn't seem to me like that dominant team. But I still picked them because I didn't know anything about FDU. I didn't know who they were. I had never heard of them before this.
And speaking of Purdue, let's look at their last 3 exits in the NCAA tournament. They haven't all been first round losses. They lost to a 13 seed, a 15 seed, and now a 16 seed, all in consecutive seasons.
Yeah.
Fun tidbit. I mean, I guess not if you're a Purdue fan. That's not a fun tidbit, but that's pretty interesting. They're those teams, for whatever reason, are prone to those sort of upsets.
Yeah.
And we talked about Princeton upsetting Arizona. That was a big one because I didn't have Arizona going very far. I thought I had them in the Elite Eight, but apparently not, because I looked this morning and I have all my Elite Eight teams. But I guess I had them in the Sweet 16. So I know out of selfish reasons, I like that. I have a close family friend who went to Princeton, so that was kind of fun. He was messaging me a bunch. I think they're close. I don't know where they would play Duke at. I think it would probably be the Elite Eight if they made it that far, because I know that he was talking about them playing Duke. I'm like, yeah, that'd be kind of fun. A Princeton Duke match, that'd be far down the road. One game that I had turned off
that'd be in the Final Four.
Final Four. Yeah, I don't have the bracket in front of me. I just have my notes. That's probably something I should have done knowing we were talking about that.
Princeton's in the South, Duke's in the East. So Princeton would have to make it all the way to the Final Four, and they could have a Duke matchup there in the Final Four.
And like I said, Princeton's one of those that in the past has upset some teams. So I don't think that would be ideally people's Cinderella story team. Team that most people haven't heard of. Of course, everyone's heard of Princeton for obvious other reasons. But I think, a Fairleigh Dickinson would be fun to be kind of like the George Washington, although George Washington kind of won there for a couple of years. At one point, Gonzaga was that Cinderella team, but they just continued to win. Xavier was in that road. Wichita State. Wichita State for a couple of years was a Cinderella team.
Yeah.
That put together a few good seasons in a row, a few good tournaments. Tennessee beat Louisiana 58-55. I had to admit, I turned that game off about halftime. Or not turned it off, but I was switching between a bunch of games and just didn't get back to it. It looked like Tennessee had that one. Clearly not, because most of these games, like we're talking about March Madness, there were a lot of upsets, but most of these teams took care of what they were supposed to take care of. We talked about Kentucky doing it, UConn doing it, but it was in dramatic fashion, and clearly Tennessee favored in that matchup. They're going to play Duke the next round. Duke, I'm trying to remember watching that game. It was never really that close. I know they kind of made it close. It was like in one of those four seed 13 matchups. I know 10 points later in the game does kind of.
Oh, you're talking about Tennessee.
Does kind of seem close. Yeah.
Yeah.
They ended up taking care of it. It wasn't even that close. But when you have those big upsets, if the underdog is like within 10 points, you're always kind of worried. Texas was the same way. They ended up taking care of business, but it seemed that they were just letting them hang around a little too long.
Yeah.
Now,
that was a matchup that Texas should have blown them out.
Yeah. And there were a few blowouts, just not as many as you normally see. I know Kansas, Alabama, those are blowouts, but for some reason it just felt like the underdogs in those respective games were hanging around a little too long. One of those was Houston.
I think that's just to bounce off of that point. I think with the transfer portal, that's why you're going to see a lot of these other teams be more competitive. And I think we're going to continue to see this. Is kids aren't going to get stuck in these big universities that, touted them around and brought them in and put them on scholarship, and then they sit the bench. They'll sit the bench for 1 year, and then they're going to transfer out and go somewhere they can play, which is going to help to build these mid to low level schools and make them competitors. And you're seeing that this year. We're a couple years into the transfer portal and then the NIL deals now. And I think this is something to continue to watch too, is how does that continue to shape college sports? But for sure, what we're already seeing is college basketball.
Yeah. Really a side note, not to get off this topic. Recruiting in all college sports now has not only become going to recruiting high school kids, it's recruiting the transfer portal, which a lot of small schools are benefiting from, like you said, but also recruiting your own players that you still you're not stuck there, or at least in most recent memory stuck where you can transfer, but you're going to sit a year depending on the situation. So now anybody can just jump ship, go to free agency. Basically, it's free agency because they can offer you different NIL deals.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It's somebody who goes to Big Ten schools, ACC schools, and now Big 12 schools, because Big 12 seems like more of a basketball conference than it ever has been. Of course, all these players are rock stars in high school. They think they can go play anywhere. They're recruited by Duke or Kentucky, and they think they're one of the best kids in the country. And then they go to these schools and they have to sit. some kids are going to stay, work their way up, but some of these kids have NBA aspirations. They think they're going to go play in the NBA, and they want to get there as soon as possible. So they're going to go transfer somewhere where they can make a big difference sooner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Houston survives against Northern Kentucky. Not really a close game in the end, but I know a lot of people, as myself, has Houston winning it all. Marcus Sasser is continuing to suffer from a groin injury that had me thinking I might not want him to be a champion. I had that in mind when I was filling out my bracket, but as I do, I just go one matchup at a time, and who do I think is going to win? And it ended up being them. I just think they're going to beat. I have them in Alabama in the finals, and when I got to the finals, they thinking they are going to beat Alabama. Also,
Houston's road to the Final Four, to me, my opinion, just isn't too tough. I don't see a team that's going to give them.
And that's why I had that.
I don't see anyone that's really going to stand in their way. I've got them matching up against. I had them matching up against UCLA in the Final Four.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. To me, Alabama's been a very dominant team this year, but I really think Houston. And then we're going to keep an eye on this because his health could be the determining factor whether these guys can push through and make it all the way and pull out a championship. I had them winning the whole thing as well.
Yeah, and Jamal Sheed for Houston's dealing with a knee injury. So neither of them have been ruled out of anything at this point, but it's something to look at. And obviously nobody can change their brackets now. As of one day in, as of yesterday morning, going into the second day of the first round, there was 0.003% of brackets still perfect after Alabama, after Texas A&M's loss, which we're about to get to. And of course, as soon as Fairleigh Dickinson won, which I actually knew somebody who had them, who picked them to win, but of course they didn't have a perfect bracket at that point. But as soon as Fairleigh Dickinson won, there were 0 perfect brackets at least submitted. I know somebody's going to take a picture and say, "Hey, my son still has a we still have some blank brackets printed out. I could just fill them out if I wanted to, do whatever I want." But don't believe anybody who says they still have a perfect bracket. It's not true.
The odds are not in their favor.
So I know this one. This is your team.
This one hits hard, man.
Penn State, Texas A&M, which isn't a huge upset. When you get to the, what's that, a 7-10 matchup, 7-10s, 9s, 8s, even 6 and 11s aren't, you're just kind of, when you're putting 68 teams in a tournament, it's hard to really say this team's better than this team.
I would want that to at least be more of a competitive game. And the problem with
I was holding out for a Texas A&M matchup in the second round.
Yeah,
that's what I
was too. But what Texas A&M made the mistake of getting away, and they did the same thing when they faced Alabama in the SEC championship game. They completely went away from playing great defense, playing small ball, and big ball. Just getting down and banging with guys in the paint, and just really trying to just demolish them. They were getting into these 3-point shootouts with them, and that's not them. They completely went away from what had gotten them to this point for them to upset Alabama earlier in the season. And they try to get into a 3-point shooting contest with what I believe is the top-rated 3-point shooting team in the country in Penn State.
Yeah,
Penn State hit 13 3-pointers in that first round beatdown. It was they beat my Aggies 76-59. It wasn't even a competitive game.
It seems like it was closer than that. I feel like Penn State jumped up early, very early, and A&M would kind of get back into it a little bit, make it with like an 8 or 9 point game, and then Penn State would make another one. But you have to remember it's hard for it's not the NBA. these kids are 18, 19, 20, 21. Some of the transfer portal are playing their 6th year in college, not in A&M in particular, but some guys are older. But coaching matters more in college ranks than it does in the NBA, because the NBA you have guys who superstars that are superstars in high school and college. They know the game. That's why you see late. It was kind of frustrating because, you know, I'm watching these games and I like to keep it going, especially close games. But those last couple of minutes always take forever because that's when they save their timeouts, because they might be drawing up plays, but they're saying, hey guys, hold your timeout, do this in a situation, do that, don't foul or do foul, try to steal the ball. They're giving them so much because these players, the stage can get too big for some of them. I mean, every team at this point has one, maybe two superstars, but there are a lot of players on that team that they're not making the NBA. Yeah, they're great college players. They're role guys, and
they got out of their game, and then you could see the panic in the way they played the game of trying to they fell early and they panicked.
And the point I was getting at, when you start falling down early, you just start chunking up threes. And it seemed like that's what they were trying to do. It's like, let's just make, we can make a couple of threes, get back in this game. And the problem is when you miss a couple and then Penn State goes back down and scores, it just gets even worse.
And that's
part of a coach
in the SEC championship game against Alabama. And they played the same way. They just couldn't match every 3 for 3 with these guys, and they got away from the game that really was successful for them this year. They tried to be something that they weren't.
And nothing against Penn State. Penn State had a good run in the Big Ten tournament, but man, I thought A&M was going to make a big run. I had them losing in the second round only because they were going to play Texas, but I feel like making that run in the SEC tournament.
To finish,
they didn't get blown out by Alabama. They played Alabama pretty well.
Yeah.
I think it was a double-digit loss, but they played Alabama well. I thought they were the team that might be able to make a run in the tournament, especially given it's Texas. It's kind of hit and miss. I mean, they've done a great job with their interim head coach. I have them. I was thinking they're either going to lose in the first round or they're going to make the Final Four. So I think until they got to Houston, that A&M could possibly make a run. Another one that was late, we thought was going to be another upset, Drake in Miami. Drake had a good lead on Miami most of the game, and then Miami comes back and finishes in the end a very close game. I know this is one you were watching, sitting in a bar last night.
Yeah, and I actually had Drake pulling this one out in my bracket. This is one of the few upsets that I could see happening. And they almost pulled that one off.
And we say upset because of their seeding. I know a lot of people that don't follow college basketball. They see a team like Drake and see a brand like Miami, although Miami's mostly, famous for football more than anything, but they have a good basketball team. So you just see Drake in Miami and think that's this huge upset that Drake had no chance being in the game. But Drake's a good team.
Drake was
of course, it was going to be an upset. They were lower seed.
Yeah, they were 27-7 this year versus the Miami team that was, I think they had 25 wins, 25-17,
which is great playing in the ACC.
Yeah.
And not the final game, but the final thriller of the night was TCU over Arizona State. TCU was down 8 points with just a little over 4 minutes to go. And this is where I was talking about the madness, how this game sort of ended. You hear that 8 minutes with 4 minutes to go and think they just made this incredible comeback. And it was.
Yeah.
But it only took them about a minute or two to get back into the game. I think it was tied with about 2 minutes to go, or it was a 1 point game. But down the stretch, both teams were missing free throws. I know TCU was down by 4 at one point, and they missed 2 free throws. And I thought, well, that was their opportunity. That's, that's a momentum shift. A lot of turnovers. There was a couple offensive fouls I guess say questionable, but they were, even the announcers kind of iffy, but it was on both sides, which you'd rather see than see like an egregious call or no call late in the game on one side. Luckily, there were a few questionable calls and reviews throughout the first couple of days, and luckily you didn't see a whole lot of chatter on social media about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, they beat Arizona State. It was a tie game, and it was great. Arizona tied the game with about 15 seconds to go. And so you saw either way, we either get a great finish, or we're going to get a great finish either way, a buzzer beater to win the game or overtime. And then Jacoby Coles at TCU made a shot with about 1 second left, caused a half court shot attempt to win the game. And of course that didn't go through, so TCU won, which was good. I see winning, but I thought State might be the better team. I don't know. I know TCU had a much harder, they were the higher seed. They had a much harder conference to play in. Outside of UCLA and Arizona. USC is pretty good too. There's not a lot of teams in the Pac-12, but the Big 12 is just littered with, Texas, Kansas State, Baylor, Iowa State. So TCU had more of a gauntlet to go through, and I don't know. It just seemed like to me Arizona was probably the better team, although they were the lower seed. But TCU pulls out the win.
Yeah, and I had TCU pulling that one out anyways. But I think you're right. I mean, I think that game of all that we've seen gave us everything we wanted. We wanted to see a nice tight matchup. We wanted to see these teams go back and forth. I think that game lived up to the hype.
So, man, talking about this, it feels like we're going into the Final Four or something with all these different storylines we talked about, but that's just the first round. It's Saturday morning. We still have today and tomorrow, the second round to see who's going to the Sweet 16. And now, I know you said your Final Four is still intact, as is mine. I know you can't make any changes to your bracket, but do you want to make any predictions? Do you want to say, hey, I think this team is going to make it to the Final Four, even if it completely screws up the rest of your bracket?
Man,
or teams that you just say, hey, I want Fairleigh Dickinson to make it or something like that.
I would like to. I'd like to see FDU make a big run here. Man,
like I said, they're one of those teams that they're a true Cinderella team. Like, I don't feel like Princeton.
I could see the hype fizzle out. I could see that fizzle out the next round, and they just,
if they lose by 30.
I think, that game will be a test. If they pull out that win, I think they could be a true contender. I think they will prove that they can bounce back and continue to fight and give it their all. You just hope that they didn't go through so much hype last night of pulling off that upset win that they lose their focus on the next game, the next opponent.
Well, they play Florida Atlantic, so you would think they'd be able to stay into that game, and then of course they have Duke after that. I mean, once you start getting to Sweet 16, Elite 8, you're probably playing a powerhouse.
Absolutely. I mean, if they were to get past that, and then I have Duke picked over Tennessee. If they were to match up against Duke and get past Duke, I mean, you've still got a pretty the Kentuckies, we got Kentucky, Kansas State, Marquette.
So with Kentucky, you have that experience in the tournament.
Yeah.
Calipari knows how to keep his players grounded. They're not they're not a 1 or 2 seed this year. But
like you said, that's what the true matchup's going to be, is the coaching. You mentioned earlier that the coaching means everything in college basketball.
Yeah, with these teams like Fairleigh Dickinson, even Florida Atlantic, Princeton, they're in uncharted territory per se. I mean, I know Princeton's made it here before, but the players, the coaches don't have the experience. It's easy to go in and have fun in the first round and pull off an upset. But now in the second round, especially since you're on the radar now, teams are really bearing down. I mean, that's why upsets are so prevalent. are a lot of teams, the 1s, 2s, 3, 4 seeds, are kind of looking forward to an extent. Maybe they won't say it, but they're like, the players at least, we're supposed to win this game. We're going to win this game. It's a disappointment if we don't get to the Elite Eight, Final Four, whatever your expectations are for your team, that you don't think about that. And then once, it's halftime and you're up by 1 or down by 1 or whatever, it's different than the NBA. These kids start to panic. It's like getting punched in the mouth. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's the coach's job to ground them. But on the other side, the other team is saying, hey, we weren't supposed to do this. We're supposed to win. We're in this. They're excited. And it's sometimes you have to be grounded from that too.
Yeah.
And now that, and I don't want to take anything away from these teams, but Duke, for example, Duke jumping into the second round, they're just focused. They win when their expectations are a championship. Fairleigh Dickinson, the kids, the players saying, hey, this is fun. We have nothing to lose, which can be good, but it can also be bad, where it's like, hey, we lose, we had fun. And that's a good mindset to have after the fact, but not before the game.
Yeah, you're right.
And a team I want to see move on pretty deep in this tournament is Pitt. Like we said, they were in the play-in game. A playing game just to make it to the first round, and just the way they handled Iowa State, I think they have a chance. Again, I don't have the bracket in front of me. I don't know how easy or difficult their schedule is going to be, but I see them that they could make an Elite Eight run, even though it would probably screw up my bracket.
Yeah, I think they could. They would have to get through. What are they at? Where are we at here? Through Texas.
Yeah.
Was it Xavier was over Kennesaw State?
Xavier, and then that's when, if they were to make it to the Elite Eight, would be Houston.
Yeah, so Houston goes. It will match up against Xavier,
Texas, possibly Penn State, Houston. Yeah, that's gonna be difficult for them. But
yeah,
now they have momentum. They've won 2 games. Yeah, and they've beat a great. Iowa State's a good team. They played in the Big 12. That's nothing to lack over. Just because Iowa State didn't look good in that matchup, I think it was more that than Pitt playing well. But
I agree. I had Iowa State picked in that game.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. There you have it. I think we did a good job of getting you ready for your Saturday slate of sports, your weekend slate of sports, talking college basketball. The only thing that sucks about the second round is there's half as many games as the first round.
Yeah.
And going forward, you have how many? 16 games Thursday, 16 games Friday. Now you're down to 8, and then it's just going to get less and less. Hopefully we have some good matchups. We do have some time left. I know this has probably been a favorite segment for some of our listeners. I'm going to jump to Tony now to talk about the thread.
Yeah, and the thread this week, because I'm here in Galveston, just less than an hour south of Houston. Let's look at the Houston Astros. They'll be opening the season with this year. In the first 2 games of the season, they're going to wear these gold, ex-gold alternates. These will be their championship golds. If you've got that.
They're winning the World Series. Hate it or not, Houston won the World Series.
Yeah. And then you have these golds. You see the gold logos, gold lettering, numbering. They're actually going to wear those in the first 2 games of the season. And they'll unveil the 2023 World Series banner on opening day. And then the players and coaches will receive their rings before the second game of the season. And then the Astros will actually be doing a giveaway with replica rings on Wednesday games this season, which they have a few of them. And those replica rings, it's kind of cool. They have, I don't have any images of those yet, but they will be. They'll have like players' names that have Bregman on them, stuff like that. Would look like what the player ring would look like. So it's kind of cool. But
who are they playing? Who are they playing in their first series?
You know what? I should have pulled that up. I didn't.
I assume it's who did they play? The Yankees in the ALCS last year? I want to say. I don't have that off the top of my head. I don't know.
I don't either.
I assume it's whoever they play in the ALCS. That's typically what they do. I don't know. They had every series is a American national team. There's at least one, so it could be a national team matchup or a World Series rematch.
Looks like they start the season.
And these are the uniforms we have pictures of because this is what they wore the last time after they won the World Series. Even though cheated to get that. I feel like I had to throw that in there for the Astros haters that are listening. Is this what the uniforms are going to look like this year? I know they haven't unveiled them, but from what people are saying.
Like. Yeah, this is what we think they're going to look like. They'll do something very...
I'm not an Astros fan, in the least bit, but that's what I was wanting. I'm not an Astros fan in the least bit, and I know they're not playing the Rangers. That's my team. I know they're not playing the Rangers in their first series, but I think they should just come out in all gold, hat, pants, jersey, just big middle finger to everyone saying we won without cheating this time.
Yeah, so at least
that's what it may come out that they cheated again. Who knows?
Yeah, they're opening up their season series with the Chicago White Sox.
Okay, weak matchup, but okay, I get it.
Yeah, I think maybe they did that on purpose.
They play it. The new format schedule now in the MLB is every team plays everybody.
Yeah,
and it's broken down, sort of like the NBA, where you play all the teams in your division the same amount. You play all the other teams the same amount, and then you play every single interleague team at least one series. I have it broken down now, whether you like it or not. I think it kind of cheapens interleague play. I liked it when they just did. I mean, I know they can't do it now because they have even amount of teams. So there's always there's 15 teams in each league. So there's always a series, like I said, with interleague play. But I liked it when they had they only did it for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Like you had your rivalry and you did 2 or 3 interleague series. Yeah. But it is what it is. That's what you have to. Maybe when they expand to a couple more teams and maybe have 16 teams in each league, maybe you can go back to that. But
yeah,
I like it. I think it's something great about baseball where I'm not going to bitch about the designated hitter. We've already bitched about the pitch clock and all the changes, but that's something we can go back to, is really keeping leagues separate, as opposed to like NBA and NFL. It's like, we just do it for playoff purposes. Keep them separated because you still have the AL, NL, MVP, and the awards.
Yeah.
It'd be nice.
Well, you can check those uniforms out starting their series opening day, March 30th. So that's a Thursday.
Are we going to go? Are we going to go to that opening day? Yeah. Try to get those rings. Again, I'm not an Astros fan, but I wouldn't mind having one of those replica rings.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you for listening to this episode of The Leadoff. Heard every Saturday morning. Make sure you tune in. Again, that's 7 a.m. Central Time every Saturday morning. Until next time, I'm Ashton.
I'm Tony. Have a good Saturday.